This was a pre-recorded interview with Mads Nissen, who's out of the Netherlands, and he's of course it's in the middle of the night there, and he was traveling, so we decided to do the interview, him and I, last week while I was also in Europe. Terrific guy, and we'll run the show now, and we'll talk afterwards. Okay, here we go, folks. Okay. All right, so Mads Nissen is with us tonight. I cannot thank him enough for jumping in and working with us to show us what's going on in Ukraine. As is the normal custom, I want to thank Photo Shelter, Epson, Archive Magazine, American Photography, and Pro Photo Daily for always being around with us during sponsoring us for all these years. And without further ado, I give you Mads Nissen, who's in Copenhagen at the moment. Is that right, Mads?
I am.
Yeah.
I'm at home, Copenhagen. Not far from Ukraine, though.
Yes. How far is that ride?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, the ride. If you could went direct, it's just a few hours. 2 hours, maybe three. I don't know. 2 hours. It should be 2 hours from Copenhagen. Yeah, I did it once, but yeah, well, I did a few times actually direct. But yeah, nowadays we go to either Poland. Last time I traveled, I went to Moldova and then crossed by land into Odessa.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
so it's all yours, buddy. Thank you again.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Thanks to everyone who's watching and care about Ukraine. My own experience with the country started a few years ago during the Maidan protest that you probably heard of. That was my first time in the country, and I covered that. I arrived the day of the fall of the former regime, and that's when I arrived at the square. So there's just been a massacre the night before. So it was quite a scene I arrived to. It was completely horrible. They were just burying people all night long. Then I moved after that. I went to Crimea to have a look at what was going on there. There was rumors that the Russians would move in. I then went back to Crimea to do a larger piece when they really took over. I'd like to show 3 stories tonight. The first one is called Natalia's War for Ukraine, which is a very unusual character. You wouldn't expect to find that along the front lines in Ukraine. So please meet Natalia. She's 44 years old, a former businesswoman, now one of the mother of 2, have a husband as well in Kiev. And now she's one of the many, many thousands of people in Ukraine, the volunteers, the army of volunteers. So this is her hand holding a hand grenade. There's many things to say about it. Well, first of all, she is the Ukraine, the war in Ukraine the Ukrainians couldn't defend themselves much without the army of volunteers. So everyone who's been in Ukraine or heard of something about it, you will find so many volunteers, whether they're old grandmothers making food to young people making camouflage nets for the tanks, volunteers at the front line. The NGO of Natalia is doing a lot of it, many things. What she's doing is more than anything is it's collecting medical supplies for the soldiers, for the hospitals along the front line, but also food. I have not seen her carry weapons, but anything else than that. I think I've seen that. So she collects it among Ukrainians, especially in the cities wherever they want to support, and she brings it to the guys at the front line. But she's a very unusual character, as you may already tell by now by her nails. she puts a strong dignity in maintaining her so to say her former self, her appearance. She this is how I met her first in a city called Pisky, which is the last time I looked was still under Russian control. Now at this time I went there, it was Ukrainian. The front line just very much there. She's walking around in these dresses, but don't be mistaken, she's not just a beautiful woman. She's more than anything. She's extremely clever and know how to make things happening. I think any photographer or editor who ever been working with logistics, working with organizing, working with making other people collaborate. I mean, she's the expert in that.
And Mads, how did you come upon meeting her?
Well, to be honest, I was a writer wanted to go back to Ukraine, and I was there in the beginning of the revolt, was this in 14, right? It was many years ago, and I was very reluctant because, like, I'm always looking for my way into it, where I have something at stake, where I feel connected, where I feel I can do a difference, not just going there for going there. And then at this time I first met her, the war had been going on for quite some time. No one cared, and it was kind of a stalemate, you know, that was frozen along the front line. And I couldn't really see what kind of difference I could do. So I started reading, and I read about one particular woman who was driving an ambulance, and they called her like Mother Ukraine or something like that because she saved so many boys. And I thought, well, that could really be an interesting way into this more original approach. In the end, she wasn't that interesting. Sorry, Mother. Maybe she was not working anymore. First, for one or another reason, we didn't really meet up with her. But a person I know said, I know someone far more interesting. And that how I was introduced to Natalia.
So you're always looking for like sort of the human interest piece to a story. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's always happening, it's always succeeding, but yeah, I really trying to find a more intimate, more personal way into the story, because at this time people in Europe didn't care much. So I like what I supposed to do, just go to Ukraine and expect that I'm better than all the other photographers and come back with some more amazing images that will actually make people care. I wouldn't bet on that. I just better to find a different approach. So if what great people are doing isn't creating the engagement that I wanted, that I think is needed, then it's time to try to find a different approach. And also, if you have 2 weeks to cover a very complicated conflict in a rather big country, it's a very short time. But if you're spending 2 weeks with just one person, you can get quite close.
Yes.
So that's kind of my idea. I think a lot of time when we do see movies, most movies have a main character, but somehow in photojournalism, a lot of the time we do not. It's just more like a very broad view upon the story. And I have examples of that as well, because that's basically how I covered the crisis later on. So it's not like, but I do think, however, that finding very more like fewer people and getting to know them better, it's the best thing you can do for creating engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
So, but she's pretty much just this amazing woman, and all you have to do is just try to keep track on her. Just put your hook in her and just try to follow, because then amazing things will happen. Yeah, hold on, which is quite a challenge. And in the end, what I did was just kind of moved into her car, because then I was.
And she was completely comfortable with you documenting her doing what she's doing.
Yeah, we get along quite well.
Yeah,
she's
great.
super straight up. If you know, a yes is a yes, a no is a no. Just like, yeah, I just try not to hinder her work, not to be in the way. But and but we get along pretty well. But she's a fighter. I mean, she's a fighter. If something bothers her, if she doesn't like you, she will tell you. Yeah, I've seen that.
Okay. Yeah, I have to say, with all the weeks of doing these shows, finding and seeing the images of the volunteers is really incredible. How it's so organized in like in just an immediate way that then doesn't seem to be turmoil. It's like, let's get going and doing it, and they do it. Really amazing.
Absolutely. You find that it's like an army of volunteers. And as I said, like it's on all levels, not just the front line, but also the grandmothers doing, even kids, you know, participating in making. If you go to the frontline shelters, not just the shelters, like the frontline trenches, you find a lot of drawings made by children, kind of we support. So yeah, it's quite impressive. She is quite different though, because she has access to the highest people at government level, so she can walk in the palaces, so to say, and among the generals, but also among the guys here in the front line. Which shows them more. She's really good, and she does a lot of first aid education. So this is a drill. This is an exercise teaching the soldiers how to put on a tourniquet, if you know that one, and just basic first aid. And she's just full. She does these amazing things, like she's high heels on duty. That's what she calls herself. And the guys have a lot of respect for her. And also, I think one of her ideas of putting on these beautiful dresses and it's also to give a sort of normality, to remind people in the front line that there's a life waiting for them, and also to in a way to encourage them to say that if I can come here, you can also continue. I mean, if even I can do this, I'll encourage you to push on. And then that's just how she is. She loves her. I think she says, I love my kids, my husband, my country, and my cigarettes.
There you go.
Smokes a lot. This is these are the things that the Russians are throwing at them. So you find all kind of grenades here. It's kind of a museum of stuff the Russians have been throwing at them. Even the flag, they got that one.
So those are grenades there.
Yeah,
Mads?
it's like a mix. I think, I'm not sure there's any landmines here. There could be landmines, and then a lot of grenades. They use drones, RPGs. I think I'm not a military expert, but I even think that one is a cluster bomb, one in the back.
On the right there, yeah.
Yeah, it's always dangerous whenever because there's absolutely some guys out there saying, like, no, it's not. But well, probably have it in my captions. So these are just some of the things that, it's a lot of metal being thrown at you. Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? Just another image from Pisky.
It's really amazing.
It's quite unusual. What I like about it is it's also people who would normally not engage so much with the war in Ukraine. They really seems to be caught by this by her, like, what, you don't expect that. And this is actually a quite dangerous place. And when I took these pictures, it's like you could hear the bombardment in the background. This is actually a church. On the other side of the church, there's some high rises, a really perfect place for a sniper. So it's quite a complicated area, but they seem to be taking it quite easily here because we are sheltered by the church.
Yeah, and imagine when you come across a person like this, do you do any interviewing? So you have, some of her voice
Yeah,
in
well,
the video?
I worked together with a writer, so he did a lot of interviews. But actually finding making her sit down and do a proper interview is really difficult. So the best option is but there's a lot of driving, a lot of logistics, and like hours of hours, like wow, just like 12 hours driving on bad roads, drive extremely fast. So yeah, that's when you can really catch up. She speaks English, not super well, so we also work with a translator. But
Right.
see, we can communicate. Yeah. So no, but see, I can mention that now if anyone feel like it. But she's perfect for a documentary film.
My God.
I don't do documentary films, but
No,
she's perfect.
but it
She's really
screams that, right?
really interesting, really clever
Yeah.
woman and with strong opinions.
Great. Good.
So it's out there now. Yeah. So yeah, it's the Russian.
And Matt, what's her last name? Just so we have it.
Yeah,
If you can say it.
yeah, I'll find because
If you can't say it, that's fine.
it's Voronkova.
Okay.
Natalia Voronkova.
Because we have a lot of Ukrainians who tune in, so they would, I'm sure they would ask for the last name.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, Russian position seen from Ukrainian trenches. I have thousands of these images. Her walking, just trying to keep up with her. Then once in a while you meet one of these guys, Ukrainian. This is, I mean, when I took this picture, it's just a few hundred meters. The Russians.
Really.
Yeah.
And how do they figure out that she's really okay?
Well, you cannot even go here unless you have approvals. So she knows the top people in every area, and then she gets approval to bring her stuff, and then she's very likable, and yeah. Then
So, but this soldier, he's looking and saying, "Who is?" I mean, it looks like he's looking like, "Who is this woman?" Like, so how do you get the guy in the trench to like figure out like what's going on here?
Yeah, she's worked there a lot and very loyal, and so people and also her NGOs is kind of famous, so people know her. But obviously she meet new people all the time. Usually this is actually, I'm not sure, I think at this very position, which is so close to the front line, I'm not sure she's there. She could have been. She's far more brave than me. It's not, but I just sometimes there's no reason for her to go all the way to the most. Sometimes she does it just to understand it, because that's also part of her job, to understand what's going on. And it used to be even more, actually, but that the whole military structure was so bad and like Soviet style. So the people on the top wouldn't get much information, or they might not get the right information. People are telling lies to the bosses. So she would go there, see it with her own eyes, and just report directly back. She did a lot. She was an advisor to the Vice Minister of Defense, as I remember it.
Wow.
Yeah. She, not anymore, but she used to be. So yeah. So she took a lot of pride in going there, seeing it by herself, making her own judgment, and report back.
That's a really intense position for anybody, right? I mean, that the generals are saying sometimes you can't trust the guys on the soldiers because they want to. I mean, that's one of the laments that you hear about Putin, and his generals are all lying to him, right? Yeah. And now you're the voice of truth. What an intense position to be in for her.
Sure.
My gosh.
Sure. Working with other armies as well as even the Danish one. I think it goes for, you'll probably find that, feeling among many soldiers, no matter the country, that the facts on the ground here is not what the politicians hear, that this is not completely in sync.
Yeah, we say it
I
disconnect.
remember that we were being told that, the Americans are, if not winning, then at least, and then the next moment, Kabul is falling. So, but sure, especially at the earlier stage, I cannot say it now actually, but when I was there with her the first time, there was a lot of this. It was a big problem that the way it was organized. Also, the corruption. You should not underestimate that Ukraine is extremely corrupt, and she has experienced several times that big trucks with medical supplies or technical equipment has been disappeared.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the Ukrainian corruption, because you had a young Ukrainian photographer a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him, what happens after this? Are the Ukrainian people just going to say, okay, let's go back to being a corrupt nation, or will it fundamentally change into something more like an even democracy? Which is going to be interesting, because if the allies are going to be sending all this aid, no one's going to be comfortable with this money just going away, or supplies.
Sure.
I think that's a big concern.
No, absolutely. I photographed the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, Juan Manuel Santos, a few years ago, and he said something really interesting. He said, making war is easy, making peace is much more difficult.
Yeah.
And you find that after conflicts, you will find a rise in everything from domestic violence to child abuse. There's a lot of traumatized men who are coming home. And just in my own country, I think it's the same in the States. In my own country, Denmark, I think we have more soldiers, veterans, dying by suicide than who actually were killed in the battle zone.
Absolutely.
So
Right.
I do not really underestimate I never really play. I was not allowed to play like a soldier or or when I was playing cowboy and Indians, I was always told to be the Native Americans.
Wow.
So so I do not come from a regular home, but I never had this romanticizing. That's not why I cover conflict. I've never been romanticized by it. I'm not fascinated by weapons or the equipment or that part of it. But I do find it. I don't like my own boys to play with guns either.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. These soldiers are fighting on their own land versus, certainly with Americans, we're always traveling somewhere to go and fight, right? Where these guys are fighting. So I wonder if that stress is the same, different, about coming back, because they could.
I do understand the question.
Yeah, they could be defending their own neighborhood.
Sure.
In so many cases.
Sure.
I wonder how that shakes out over time. But
maybe the determination, maybe the discipline, maybe the willing to sacrifice. But I do think the PTSD, the trauma, I mean, it's so scary, and maybe I can talk about that with the next story, or one of the next stories with the soldiers. We can talk about that. I do not. I think. I do get it, because why are you there? That really makes a huge difference. And I also think that what troubled a lot of if I may be so honest, but I do think that troubled a lot of the Americans who went to Vietnam and to Afghanistan. Like, why were we really there? Did it really make any difference? were we the
Yeah.
good guys and so on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is I have 6,000 images of this one. Her packing stuff, organizing the stuff. This basically, yeah, supplies. Here, this is this is Ukraine. This is a frontline village. This is very intense area, and then you see two people in the background, or villagers who just decided to stay there. And for anyone else, it looks like a beautiful little village, right? But sometimes that's the complicated things in photographing and conflict, that you feel it, you hear it, maybe the noise, or doesn't always translate into images. Here she's handing out first aid, and we were told to be quite like, come in, get out. And this one, yeah, I don't know what else to. There's a few tanks in this village marked with a set, but the Russians who were inside burned up when they were hit. Yeah.
Okay.
This is in the evening after a very long day. Just taking off her makeup. This military training exercise, teaching the boys to put on the tourniquet. I actually even had to do a bit of self-censorship here, because I have a lot of images when they're doing the drill, and some of them look absolutely like real, like it was like as if it was not an exercise. And when I showed it to people, they were like, wow, this is crazy. It's just an exercise, it's just training. So I decided in the end not to use them, because it was kind of it seemed manipulating, like, right? So here you can actually, I hope you can see that it's kind of a exercise. And there's cannabis.
You see that
Huh?
boy. I mean, you see this boy in the center here. You can see his face. He looks like he's 18 years old. Looks like
Exactly.
a baby.
Yeah, and to do everything they can to make it like stressful, and to push them to make it as much
Realistic.
real as possible. Yeah. Yeah, these drills, these exercises, this training will absolutely save their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, another cigarette. Yeah, so brutal, these metal animals, right? And these tanks. So one of her very dear friends was driving a car in this area close to the front line, and it's hard to know what happened, but what she thinks happened is that there were some other Ukrainian soldiers who were doing smuggling, and her friend discovered that and turned them in and started fighting them, and they went back on him and did an ambush. So at this very site, they attacked his car with an RPG and with guns and killed her friend. So this is a memorial mark for her friend.
So I understand he reported other Ukrainians smuggling bad things in, or smuggling things
across. Yeah. So he
And so
reported them badly. Yeah.
So these Ukrainians came back and killed their own.
Exactly.
Wow.
According to her.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that's how he was killed. So obviously she's been very close many times. Had concussions from shelling, and car accidents. A lot of her friends have passed away. This is very personal for her, very personal. Yeah, I think that's the last image. That's Natalia Vorunkova.
Yeah. So let me ask you, Matt, when do you realize, as you're covering the story and you're finding your angles, that wow, this is really special. This
Mm.
is real. Like, how does that hit you?
I'm just after being with her for 2 minutes.
Is that right? You knew right away. Okay, good, great. Yeah, I know.
This is much more amazing than these images. Like someone should do a documentary film. I mean, she's amazing, and she is representing so many layers of Ukrainian society and of this conflict. And then she's just entertaining to be around, and she knows everyone and very well connected. And yeah, I really like her, and her work is just impressive. Impressive, the amount of tons of equipment she collects and get out to the boys in the field.
Right.
So in this case, I'm quite selective, maybe. So when I get the sense of something, I really like. Think maybe it also comes a bit with experience. Not that I'm that old, but that and just trusting your own gut feeling that this is not really anything, just move on, or this is really something where it's also about knowing your strengths and your weaknesses or your boundaries or whatever, what kind of photographer you are. And then yeah, for me it was all at this stage of the conflict, it was all about making it personal. I felt that was what it needed to make it personal, and maybe also surprising, because people felt that they seen everything, and that's completely unfair. But still, a lot of people have that feeling, and you cannot just ignore it and just be like, yeah, I'm doing something important, so I don't care if you care about it. But well, I do. It's not.
Right.
It's all about engaging people, and if you get the response that this don't really get. I mean, I've done a lot of stories where I felt that it was super important, but somehow I didn't. I did my best, but it was just didn't really get the attention of people. I didn't break their heart. And even this work, it could be better. Absolutely. I shot it with a medium format, Hasselblad, which I think maybe was the wrong decision anyway. So these kind of criticism and reflections, I can do a lot.
That's yeah.
Move
to your
on?
credit. Yes, move on.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So the war broke out in February, and so these images are taken just in the beginning of the war. I went to Lviv. First of all, we had several teams, and then I went to Lviv to cover what turned out to be this enormous refugee crisis. Last time I looked, I think it was 7 million people who had left Ukraine. Well, we can all look for facts on the internet or reliable sources, media. What I will talk about here is how it felt, emotions, were the people I met. So this is Lviv train station, who became the hub of the town, where everyone would, most people would come. They came from all parts of the country, cities and villages that to me were still strange names, but later on, as I moved to cover the eastern part of the country, I got to know those cities by myself. I don't know what to say. It's it's mainly women, children, as the men were not allowed to leave. Traveling for 18 hours, 20 hours, 24 hours. Yep. This image, yeah, her name is Oksana, and his name is Euheny, and they're saying their last goodbye, and they have 2 children together, teenagers, and they are going to Poland, and he has to stay back and fight the Russians. So it's not just a farewell into this uncertainty that, you know, it's hard enough to leave your own country like that and just be a refugee. But maybe the most painful part is that they may never see him again, because as he has to go and fight. There was a lot of situations like this. I'm sure you already seen a lot of images of this farewell at the train stations. But for me, as a father myself, I have 3 children. It was also some of the most touching scenes. Was some of the most, what really hurt me the most, seeing that, how they were ripped apart. So inhumane. Old people as well. You know, there were people dying at that train station, and you couldn't wonder, just think like, why? You know, why? It's like, what in hell is worth this war? You know, what in hell justifies that an old lady who survived so much, who, you know, is gonna die in the cold. It was so cold, just dying in the cold here at the train station. Like, family being ripped apart like that. That was to me the most, probably, I don't know if the most, but like, it was really, at least it was really made me angry, and not just sad, but also angry. Some young kids here, Lisa and Veronica, I guess their names, just standing in a queue, queuing up, waiting. Some of them were able to get back in the queue if they went to the bathroom, but sometimes people didn't dare to move to lose the spot in the queue. But in general, I think they were really nice to one another. To me, they were really helpful and kind to one another in such a difficult situation as they were in. One train, a lot of trains are arriving. People leave it. They don't know where to go. They do, information. Refugees always need information. What is happening? Where to go? What to go next? What's the best option? What if we go here? What if we go here? Traveling with children. I mean, it's hard enough for the rest of us. And then I think I always look for the yin and the yang. If it's the most horrible situation, I look for the beautiful things, or maybe more than anything, I look for what I can relate to. And I have a girl at the same age who also liked pink, and I just react to it because I can relate to it. So I think that's my method. Photograph what I can relate to, or look for something I can relate to, even though our circumstances are so different. This family of 5 children, and they are trying to board the Ukrainian soldier. They're trying to board the train. They're being denied because the man cannot leave, and etc. But they actually have permission, because when you have 5 children, the man can leave as well. So that's the whole arguing and fighting. The soldier didn't know the rules, so it was completely chaos and very emotional. In the end, they did board the train. Outside of the train station, looks like, I don't know what it looks like. Something from another century, and a festival, and I don't know. This is how it looks, the refugee crisis today. It's inside a train. We put it on the front cover of the newspaper Politiken, where I work, and we got a lot of responses from Danes who remember similar images from the Second World War. To many of those people, it reminded them of images of the Jews as they were to go sent to the concentration camps.
You know, you've used that word a couple of times, refugee.
Yeah.
And I find that word to be so, like, I never had such a gut feeling towards that word. You know, these people were all just citizens in their own country, and as soon as they get on that train, they are now labeled as a refugee. That is,
Yeah.
it's so striking. I never thought of that word in such a powerful way
Hmm.
than I do now, because they were just
Yeah.
citizens
No, and it's
of those little villages that you're photographing, and now they're refugees.
yeah, sure.
Really intense.
Sure, those labels are horrible, and then and
Yeah.
even and a very good friend of mine, a colleague, Jakob Erben, he's been photographing the refugee crisis, but it's also called the immigrant crisis. So there's this fight between whether they are immigrants or the refugees, and of course it matters a lot because we are obliged to help the refugees, which we do not always do, but not the immigrants. So it's a very politicized word, actually. What happened here in many of the European countries is that we as a nation, not as me personally, but the politicians were much more welcoming of the Ukrainians than what we saw from refugees from Syria.
Yeah.
So I think compared, Denmark is one of the countries most hardened immigrants and refugees, and we were the politicians were much more open to people from Ukraine.
Yeah.
So there's also a lot of politics even within that word. And this man his name is Roman, and the wife is also Oksana, and they had 3 children. It's the girl crying here in front, the boy on Oksana's arm, and then the tall boy in the middle. So they're saying farewell to the father, and yes, who died this is quite early stage in the war. He died in the east, but he's been taken back to the west side of the country here and doing the last farewell. There's a mother and sister just right next to me, and I don't know. It's just he's 44, and it's almost my own age, and I also have 3 children. So they're not that old, but it's just I can imagine I have a mother and a sister. I could imagine, and this is some of the thoughts that I'm taking with me as well when I work. How would it be? What risk am I taking? What would be? How would my sister react? How would my mother react? How would my wife react? How would my children react? And this is so, I don't know. I think it's also scary. It's
Yeah.
way it can be a mirror of the danger of this conflict for everyone who's involved in it. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I like this. I also photographed the church and the actual funeral. I like this image better. It's just more intimate to me. It's more. It's also the normality that this used to be the living room, and now it's just there. Roman. He's a police officer before the war. I don't know. I just like this image because I know it's like kind of boring, but it's just, to me, it shows how the conflict moved into even the tiniest village, and it became this. How it changed. Like, it's just everyone is involved in it, even though you're not on the front line. This is as far as away from the front line you can get, and still people feel like doing something to put up a barricade so you cannot drive into the village, and the local men are keeping guard. Just the normality somehow. in my own country, we were occupied by the Germans for 5 years, and still people tell stories about that. There's so many books about it. There's movies, there's theaters, there's fiction, there's historians, and there's just 5 years, and it was quite, compared to other countries, so peaceful here. So I can only imagine what it will mean. That I'm sure that all Ukrainians will be able to tell the story of the war. Even this little girl who's riding the lion just on the border to Poland. But I like to look for those images of these people that were well dressed, as you say. They're not just refugees. They are IT engineers or whatever, psychologists, or it's quite, it's just the for many West Europeans, it's very easy to relate to this group of people. Yeah. Anastasia, she's actually an IT engineer. I think she helped develop a Call of Duty, actually, one of the other video games. And now she's there, freezing, completely cold, freezing. Left her husband, now traveling with her son. Twins in the foreground, woman comforting her mother. Actually, this woman in the background with the little girl, she's a psychologist. In a church, I was just I was just walking in the streets one day. I heard this beautiful song, and I felt like, oh, it's coming from the church, and I wanted to go in, and I'm not religious, but I felt that I too could need to heal my soul a bit and just find this peace that you sometimes can find in religious rooms. And I went inside, and one of the things I saw was this boy who escaped from the east part of the country, and now he was just sitting there getting a little bit of heat from the heater. Yes. Yes. I'll drink a cup of tea, and then I don't know if you have any questions. Otherwise, we can.
I'm letting you speak because hearing you talk. It's funny with that the church shot. I was wondering if there were benches in there at some point, and they were taken out because they needed firewood, or for some other reason. I don't know that. I'm just suggesting that.
Yeah, there used to be more, I guess. I don't know.
I can't tell where they also.
Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah.
I went back to see if there was more people coming, that maybe people were sleeping in that church, but as far as I know, there were not.
Yeah, and like I said, listening to your words is very powerful. I don't want to interrupt you all the time.
That's all right. So this story I call Ukraine is Bleeding. It could be named many things, but this is a frontline hospital. I cannot tell where it is exactly, but it's in the very east of the Ukrainian of the part of the Ukrainian territory that is still under full Ukrainian control.
What a striking color palette from everything else.
Yeah,
the silver, the blue, the light, all of that. Right?
Yeah, it's it's so horrible and yet so beautiful somehow, right? Yeah. So basically, it's this is these images of just a few months to May the month of May. And at this time, it wasn't going very well for the Ukrainians. And I remember reading the news and a lot of stories about how superior the Ukrainians were. They were smarter, they were better, they were higher moral, Everything was going so well. It's just a matter of how much we're going to beat, how much the Ukrainians are going to beat them, the Russians. And then I was standing there and at this particular hospital and just like, oh shit, I mean, that's not what I see. That's not what the soldiers are telling me. They are telling me that they need all kind of equipment. They need shoes, they need ammunition, they need medical supplies, they need everything. And they are just getting beaten up. That's what they told me. So it's like, okay, I mean, maybe it's not, maybe some of the information we get is not really accurate. It's just not so successful as we sometimes are being told, because a lot of Europeans and American, they like to hear that. But,
propaganda is a big tool.
Yeah. So this is just to give you an idea, I'm there and then the ambulance are coming just like, and this is Andre. He's sitting there, the guy next to him, he had a huge shrapnel in his leg. It was huge. I mean, I never seen such a big leg. And Andreas just sitting there. I think he's 26 years old, completely paralyzed at this moment. And then just people are just, sometimes it's very quiet, and sometimes a lot of people are just, there's a bus of a lot of ambulances just, maybe there's a break in the fighting and the ambulances can actually leave, or maybe there's an offensive. A lot of these people were wounded around Bakhmut, if you heard about that. Very heavy fighting at this point. So just coming in all kind of conditions. You see the face of this man in the background. It just has this one of them it looks intense, and the other one it's kind of completely nothing. This man got a shrapnel in his stomach. It's been taken into the operation theater. There's actually another hospital, but also along close to the front line. This is Andre again. I really got to like him. He was just a great dude. As I said, 26 years old, got a shrapnel. He really thought he had his legs amputated. It wasn't as bad as he thought, so they just managed to take it out, and he should be fine again. But I remember him calling his mother, and I do not speak Ukrainian, but I did a recording of it, and he's telling his mother how he's been hurt, but that he will be okay, and she shouldn't worry. And it's like, wow, that's really heartbreaking. That conversation, like, hey, Mom, it's me. Something happened to me, but I'm okay. I'll come back.
It's interesting. You're fighting a war, but it's still your mom, right?
Yeah.
Who do you call? You call your mommy.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Really beautiful.
And imagine getting that phone call, right? Like, it's the worst nightmare for anyone. And then was there and just trying to eat the pain. Or whatever you call it. I mean, it's just so painful. He did well.
Good.
So here the guys are coming out from one of these buses that are taking them from one place to another. It's just so bad conditions to just, barely survived. And maybe there's a mix. I think there's a moment for everything. I think there's a moment to really document the atrocities that the Russians are committing. And then I think there's also a moment to step back and and it's like, yeah, we just maybe sometimes we don't need more information. We don't need more images that are kind of screaming at us, but
Yeah.
sometimes a more quiet image can actually be more, has a stronger impact, maybe.
Yeah. No,
In a
that's
way
right.
that's, yeah. So the quietness sometimes is more powerful than the more noisy images. And
And how far away is this from the front lines? This hospital.
um, maybe, well, at this point, the problem is if I tell you, I'm not sure I am allowed to tell you.
Okay, don't. Yeah, fine.
Yeah, so it's probably not problematic, but even if I do, I don't know. We don't want to take that risk. But it's it's, yeah, people get, if you're wounded in Bakhmut, they took people from Bakhmut. So which is on the front line.
Yeah.
So
And
the
so,
problem is the hospitals need to be rather close in order to make a difference. But if they're too close, they're too exposed to. But obviously, it was completely secret, and there's a lot of things I couldn't photograph. But these images are not censored. They are not. I do not work under these kind of. I do not accept these kind of censorships where they can. Yeah. So these are taken with like press freedom, but there's certain things. There were certain rules like documents or also certain people, and of course the building from outside. There was very, very clear restrictions.
so, man, you find, you're covering the war, and then how does it happen that all of a sudden you're in the hospital and this
Yeah.
is going to be, I'm going to be here for the next day or 2 days or 3 days? How does that sort of morph into, I'm now covering the hospital?
I managed to get into the hospital a little bit by accident, but of course, and then when I got inside and saw what happened, I changed all my plans for the next few days, because I knew that this was very unusual, and there was a strong potential here to do a story. So that's I just dropped all my plans, and
So
I cannot really. I don't mind. I really like to share all my how I work and my my dirty underwear. I don't know. The only trouble is that it's not just me. It's also some of the people I work with. So that's why I don't like to go into details about that. But anything that has to do with my own, vanity or
No, I
dirty
understand.
underwear, I'll be happy to share it. It's just as long as it's either security or people I work with. So that's why I cannot really tell much details about it. But of course, it's a fight. It's almost, it can be impossible. And yeah, it's really, I don't know. For me, it's, at least maybe other people have great contact, but for me, getting access is always very complicated. But it's worth it, because once you get into these, this is about photography. It's in many ways, it's take me to a place I haven't seen before. Let me meet the person, let me feel the person that I did not know. Yeah.
And yes, so you're in the hospital, and the next day, being that you were there and people recognize you, it's easier to get back in the next day. So now you're sort of accepted. Is that?
Yeah, of course, in a place like this, you cannot work if you do not have approval.
Credential, right? Okay.
It's impossible. It is like no way. So and then I've been working in hospitals before, even during the war in Afghanistan. I worked in Helmand province. I worked at a field hospital. So and during COVID as well. So I know, I believe I have a little bit of an idea of how to move around in a hospital and where the images are actually So I know that at the operation theater, you really need to give them some working space. Other situations, you might want to push your luck a little bit and move a little bit closer because there's a lot of people. So if you're not standing in the right spot, you just get a lot of people's back and stuff like that. And how to get close but still be respectful for the staff and the patients in this super vulnerable situation. So in some of them, I would even like Andre, when I first met him, I photographed him. And then later on, he didn't honestly knew what was happening much at that point. I just had a little eye contact, but not much. But enough for me to take pictures. But still, then later on, when there was more time and we could speak quietly, I said, "Hey, I took these images of you. I think I got your approval with your eyes, but what happened and is it okay? And let me hear your story and so on." But the more you stay, the more absolutely, the more confident people will get with you. But yeah.
Okay.
I was going to tell a bit more. It just
No, tell me to stop.
I'm sure it's not the first photographer working in Ukraine. It was like, sorry, there's some things I better not go.
Yeah. No, I understand. We all understand completely and respect that for sure.
Yeah. For sure. But So this image is this soldier who passed away on the operation theater. But what was really touching to me was that all his belongings, they put it in the white bag and put it next to him. And somehow, I don't know how you feel, but a lot of time when I look at pictures of, or when I see or look at pictures of dead people, I almost feel like turning my face away. And this is in a way that's somehow the opposite we want to do with photography. We want to make people look even more and get even more emotional. So how do we show the pain, the horror of the war, and still get people closer and not push our readers away? And I find that a kind of constant challenge. How do you scream without making people cover their ears? And to me, sometimes it's the small details that make it human, or like that, the fact that this white bag contains all his belongings. I find it much stronger than some of the images that I have from the operation theater, with people, bones and blood, and it's like, oh, it's like it's just.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, that is just, that's war, that's life, that's death.
Yeah.
That's a young man, that's a father, that's a son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also find it more respectful. And if we do not treat the people that we're photographing with dignity, how can we expect anyone else to see them as human being and not just as a dead soldier or another refugee or so? So it's all about making them, making numbers into names, so sort of say.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, it's powerful in that there's nothing else going on, and you're just left there.
Yeah.
In a hallway that people are going to walk by, smoking cigarettes and.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
I mean that's war.
That's and maybe they don't even know he's dead yet. I mean, maybe they don't even know, like someone's gonna bury that body and it's just
Tough stuff.
Maybe that's another image here.
Yeah,
I see they put the sandbags in the windows,
right,
in the full when they're shelling.
So would you say a lot of that equipment that you see in the hospital, is that stuff that's coming from the West, or they had that, or I mean, or you wouldn't really know?
No, I do, because I think I can also speak more general from what I've seen. because at this specific hospital, um, I was there I was not there with Natalia, but when I've been visiting smaller hospitals with Natalia to give medical equipment, I've been seeing that she's been delivering from anywhere. But a lot of equipment from the West, I've seen that. But also, what I saw at this specific hospital was that they were just in desperate need of medical supplies and equipment. And as I think they said, like the soldiers, they needed, like for instance, when they got there and they sometimes they need to cut open, cut their uniform to work on, to get access to the wound. And so obviously afterwards you cannot really use it. You can, I think this image actually shows, he has a tourniquet on his arm to stop bleeding, to prevent bleeding, which is quite painful to have it. And afterwards, they couldn't get a uniform. So some volunteers donated clothes, but so they went to look through the clothes, some soldiers, and they found it was like women's jeans, like fancy women jeans. It's like all kind of shit being donated. They're like, hey guys, I mean, we're going to war, and very soon you're gonna push me back into the trenches, and you cannot even give me a uniform. So they really needed everything. And then you talk about night vision and so on. Maybe it's better now in some areas, but definitely they really needed everything. Like I mean, there's other NGO, because that's changing all the time. So if someone wants to donate, there's a lot of these volunteers are saying like, right now we need this and this and that, and so on. A lot of the time they need the more sophisticated equipment rather than another blanket and so on. And cash is always good.
Yeah. Yes.
If you give it to the right person.
Yeah. We spoke earlier about corruption. I was talking to a friend of mine here who's very much involved in the Ukrainian experience. And they were saying that so much of the donations that they send and supplies that they buy here and send over, it's almost counterproductive, because they should just send the money over and buy the things right in Europe instead of having to ship them across from the States over. But with corruption being what it is, who knows where that money's going to go, and will they actually buy supplies? Or people take it, on and on and on. So it's really an interesting dilemma there.
It is. Also, people like to donate, things they have in the house. The kids need a book, or the kids need clothes, so you donate your clothes. But before you pack it and unpack, repack it and ship it, I don't know. It's probably worth like a real investigation. But I also know, even in I've been in Niger, where they had these cash programs, and there's the middle of Sahara, where they actually figuring out that sometimes it's better with cash, because then the local markets becomes more sustainable. Because if you just put in a lot of rice, the whole flow, the local businesses are breaking down, and the natural supply chain is breaking.
Yeah.
But I don't know, is capitalism working? I guess that's also the question, because it's actually not. Although if it was working, so it's a more. I'm not to say. I mean, I did not do an academic study on it, but I just seen it happen, and I've seen it work. And I also think sometimes they know better, and it's also changing. They might need something one day and then something else another day.
Yeah.
So a night vision is not just a night vision; it needs to be just talk with any photographer. It's like, I need a lens, but I have Canon. What I'm going to do with a Nikon lens? That's a really good parallel, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's right. That's absolutely right.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel yeah. This is kind of the stories that I chose to show you tonight. I think it's better just to say with this wave from Ukraine that is really happening now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
this is
I can't. Yeah.
Sorry?
No, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing the imagery, but equally as important is sharing the stories, because that's really
Yeah.
that's that's the most important, to give us the human touch to
Yes.
to what's to what's happening on the ground there. And so, are your plans to go back, Mads?
No, to be honest, I don't. I will go back, but it will take some time. I have a story that I'm also working on in Colombia.
Ah,
My wife is Colombian. I've been working there many times. So I work in a big story that I will go to in October. But it's definitely still super important, and we as photographers, as journalists, do not just leave it because it's it's kind of
second story, third
leaving the
story.
agenda. So I would definitely, I really hope, and I know that there's a lot of good colleagues going there, but I guess sometimes it's also, it becomes a bit more difficult to convince your editors to go because they feel like, yeah, what's the new thing? Like, what's
Yeah.
the new thing? There's a gun, and it's just like you having sometimes see these fights, and yeah, I mean, right now, as the Ukrainians are pushing, there's definitely going to be interesting to get testimonies from those occupied areas to hear how life has been. I mean, we all remember the images from last time the Ukrainians pushed back and liberated villages, and we got a lot of horrible testimonies from those areas. And that this of course this is what we fear to get
You could stop
similar
sharing
stories.
too, Mads, if you like.
Ah,
You could stop sharing if that's your last image.
okay, yeah,
But yeah, only if it is.
yeah, it is my last image.
Oh, it is. Okay. Yeah. You could stop sharing them. Yeah.
Okay.
The yeah, these ongoing dilemmas of what to do next, and how to do it and how to show it. Uh, so after you cover something like this, do you feel changed? Do you feel like what do you feel? Um, after going through this, I mean, do you have your own stress? Like, and how do you, when you get home, just decompose? How do you do that?
Mhm.
Decompress?
Well, I go every time I go. I afterwards I have it like debriefing with a psychologist.
Right.
A few sessions depending. It's been a little bit rough year because I was in Afghanistan for quite some time, which was not as how to say, like, maybe not as, like, it wasn't conflicts as
Yeah.
Ukraine, but it was just, I mean, it really took a hard toll on me. It was very emotional, very horrible, very it was really hard. And
And
then I was in Ukraine at the beginning of the war, and then I was in Colombia doing some of this next work working on back in Ukraine, then 3 months on parental leave, and then now I'm going back to Colombia. So it's almost too much, I think.
yeah,
For me, I think it's also about finding this balance.
yeah,
And I always have this idea that if I'm not in balance, or if I'm not in touch with my own emotions, if I do not listen to my own emotions, then I cannot relate, and then I cannot relate to others. If
yeah,
I cannot feel myself, I cannot feel other people. And if I cannot feel other people, then what kind of photograph will I take? Then I will just be another, then it's all about techniques, and that
yeah,
doesn't take long. So it's like my whole idea of empathy to be the most important thing, the power of photography, the empathy that we can actually connect through an image. it demands that I am also emotionally open and have a space for it. And so I actually decided to just concentrate on Colombia for now, and then I'll be with my family as well. That's at least the plan.
Okay, great.
But I do, I mean, it's just a personal thing because I need to protect myself and then protect, other people I love. So
yeah,
I really encourage people to, there's so many ways to put attention to this conflict, to this war. And also maybe I'll do something from here in Denmark or somewhere else, but there's so many ways, there's so many aspects to give it attention. In many different voices. I love the diversity of photography. I'm not this kind of photographer who just love my own pictures and think all my colleagues' work are shit. I really find a lot of inspiration, a lot of admiration for my colleagues who are doing the works in those different ways.
Yeah, no, and that's really a perfect way for us to end our segment, because it is about this whole community of what you guys do, men and women, that bring attention to the rest of the world, that we get to see and know what's going on. So I cannot thank you enough for doing this. And when your Colombia story is able to be released, and you have a ticket anytime you'd like to present, we'd love to have you back.
Thank you, Frank.
We really
thank you
would.
for this opportunity to share the work.
And remain safe. Go do it all for us, and remain safe for yourself and your family. And we'll always have you in our prayers, that you are safe. So we really do appreciate that very, very much. So thank you, and we'll see you on the road.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Mads. Okay, good night. And there you have it. It was it's interesting with Mads. He goes slower, and there's something about that makes you just sort of stop in your own tracks, like after a day of the normal hectic of running and going and this and that, and then there you are, you just sort of reflective. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed watching that, actually.
I feel like with so many of these presenters, like I'm not always on here, but when I am, I feel like there's this calmness, like this in the way that they speak, and when we see it from so far away and are just like seeing the scenes that they're photographing, it seems so, and it is so horrible and so shocking and has such a big impact, but then there's always like this calmness about the presenter that is like kind of daunting, I feel, to hear them present such challenging work with so much calmness.
Yeah, but you're right. And it's them at home now, and they're doing their own set of reflecting on on that experience, and they have the time to reflect and to decompress and to give it a context. So yeah, there's something really nice about that. I like that a lot. So any other questions? Tomorrow night we have two presenters. Both of those will be live. Wolfgang Schang and Ken Sedeno. So those two presentations, I know, will be terrific and powerful for sure. And we're on for Friday as well with Carol Guzzi, who is, as we spoke before, Jason, she's a 4-time Pulitzer Prize winner, which promises to be very inspiring as well. So I want to thank everybody for coming in. This will all be up on our YouTube page by maybe Friday, and or if not sooner. But I appreciate everyone coming, and we'll see. Hopefully, we'll see you tomorrow. And